Welcome. Hopefully you can hear me. There are going to be three of us. We're going to do a panel discussion on video games because that's what you need after a full day of resource presentations. So I'm Blake Corbet. I run the investment banking group at PI Financial for all the tech and healthcare projects we do. And I have with me today, to my right immediately, Matt Sroka from Axion Ventures, a listed company here in Vancouver. And to his right, Wil Mozell, who's an established expert in the video game industry, a guy from Vancouver, co-founded a company, sold it to Microsoft, worked for them for years, and now roams the world looking for new and wonderful, exciting opportunities in the video game market. So to give you a little bit of context, in terms of video games generally, I thought I'd ask my panelists here just how big the video game market is, just to give people context. And so Matt, if you are able to speak, give us a little context.
I think I'm able to speak. To compare, just put it on a per revenue basis, we're looking at $137 billion globally generated from video games. Now that's split between mobile games, PC games, and console games. The last 6 years have seen a massive growth on the mobile side. In fact, it's outpaced the growth in console market as well as the PC market together. Now, of the 137 billion, 70 billion is attributed to mobile market, 32 is to the console market, and 37 is to the PC market. And of those, of that revenue, the majority is generated between three areas in the world. Number one is China at 37 billion. Number two is the US, or North America, but really the United States, 32 billion. And the remaining is Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, which comes in at a very humble 27 billion. I think. Humble
indeed. So I'd like to get a little bit of color on that. But so the point here is that video games are a multi-billion-dollar industry, but China is the largest player in the space?
China's definitely by far the largest market. Obviously, everybody understands the population that has access to the internet. We look at over 500 million people play games in China. But it's also important to think about who's monetizing these gamers across the board. And one of my favorite comparisons actually comes from fiscal 17 dollars when we think of a company named Tencent, who's the world leader in publishing games. Some people have heard of Tencent because of their investment in different companies, whether it be Tesla or what have you, but they are the world leader in games. They made $18 billion in 2017 in games, and that's PC and mobile games. In comparison, Sony, and everybody I'm sure has heard of Sony PlayStation, came out in 1994, they made $10.5 billion globally. So the 18 billion versus the 10.5. And then we'll just work our way down. Apple, and everybody knows that iPhone changed gaming forever in 2007 with the iOS store. Apple makes $8 billion in games. Actually, I'm sorry, $10 billion in games. And then we look down a little bit further and we have Microsoft at around $7 billion in games. So right now, Tencent, the world leader in publishing games, it's no accident that they are the leader, they're in the biggest market, and they're dwarfing every other company that is in the game publishing business.
I'll just add to that, because we're at the resource show, the recent merger or announcement of a merger between Goldcorp and Newmont, collectively both companies generated $10.1 billion of revenue. So it just gives you an idea of how powerful Tencent is in the video game space.
So those are big numbers, and you know, we're talking tens of billions of dollars in market share for large companies across the globe. I think it would come as a surprise to many that China is the largest market. Is this a mature industry, or are we still seeing growth in this industry?
So I remember in the mid-90s, we were making games on Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, the PlayStation came out, and I'm not kidding you, in the mid-90s, Electronic Arts and other companies, we were wondering how big games would get. We're talking companies that were making tens of millions, not billions of dollars. And every 5 years, we kind of go through a moment of reflection and unbelievable sort of awakening that the business continues to grow. And we've always marked our progress as an industry against Hollywood. And it was exciting because we were starting to track towards Hollywood box office receipts. Obviously, that model's changed a bit, but you can honestly look at how well companies are doing in gaming when you think about how they launch a game in the first 3 days and what that revenue looks like globally compared to some of the biggest box office hits. And some of the ones I think about back at 8 years ago, Call of Duty crested $500 million, $500 million in 3 days. And I remember being Xbox and wondering, like, that is unbelievable, but how far can we go? We have games just this past year in 2018, Red Dead Redemption, and I believe it was almost $1 billion in its first 3 days of release. And so put that into perspective, we think every 5 years this just continues to grow and grow. And in my opinion, I mean, really, there's no end in sight, really.
Well, to add that, Red Dead Redemption was $725 million in the first 3 days. So video games have gotten so big that they've started grouping them with movie releases or box office releases. They're now called entertainment releases. Number one in history is Grand Theft Auto 5, and that surpassed $1 billion on its opening weekend. Red Dead Redemption 2, another video game, generated $725 million in their first 3 days. The first movie doesn't appear until the number 3 position, and that was the Avengers movie, which generated $638 million in opening weekend. Infinity Wars, correct? Yeah.
Avengers: Infinity War, indeed. So, and in terms of this market, we're still seeing growth. You know, some of the statistics I've seen over the last 6 years, from 2012 to 18, the entire video game industry grew by 12% compound annual growth rate. But within that, we've seen an enormous growth in mobile games. And there are a few reasons for that, I think, and probably a lot of context. I think Matt said that the mobile video games are about half of all the $140 billion. They are the fastest growing, 33% over the last 6 years. What are some of the features of mobile games versus the other two components, which I guess would be PC video games and console video games? Right?
So with mobile gaming, obviously since 2007, when we really had a computer in our pocket, we've seen things explode. And there's been this comparison for over a decade. Are mobile games killing off PC? Are they killing off console games? And I really think the mobile market is continuing to grow because everybody has access to Wi-Fi or LTE, and it's easy to download an app. And whether you're playing, Words with Friends or you're playing the latest Fortnite on your mobile device, everybody has a massive selection of titles. This doesn't mean that the market is eroding console. What it actually does is it actually brings people down the funnel of gaming. It might be somebody that's only ever played on a mobile device, now has the opportunity to go to the retail Best Buy and buy an Xbox, buy a PlayStation, or stay at home with their PC and upgrade it and enjoy even greater fidelity, bigger, deeper experiences. So the mobile market will continue to grow as devices and access, whether we look at major markets that are still untapped. There's a big conversation that could be had about what's going to happen when India really starts having access to content that actually can be monetized in the category of entertainment. In the meantime, we look at Asia as being the prime market where that continues to explode.
I just think that the barriers to entry on the mobile side are much lower than the console and PC market, although on the hardware side, we have seen a drastic decrease in the amount that it costs to buy a gaming PC. Now you can have gaming laptops that different retailers that were never in the business now producing. Of course, they're not at the top end, but it gives you the ability to take advantage of some of the largest video games in the world, like PUBG, like Fortnite, and allows you to play them on a mobile device. So you don't have to buy a TV, you don't have to buy HDMI cords, you don't have to buy a console. So in terms of what Will said, it really is acting like a funnel, the mobile market. It's acting like a funnel to distribute more content and market really the higher end products that developers will put out to the market, and that's on the PC and the console market. Okay,
so video games, large and growing market. China, we discover, is the largest of those markets and growing at that same pace. Will you describe Tencent as a dominant player in the largest video game market, largest share of video games in terms of dollars? And Matt, I know you're connected to and working with Axion Games. Tell us a little bit about Axion Games and kind of how they fit into this whole circle.
Sure. Axion Games is first and foremost listed in Canada, but our operations are totally outside of North America. We have a studio in Shanghai that houses 400 developers. We have a studio in Bangkok that's a joint venture with another company that we have 120 developers working at. And what we've been really hyper-focused on for the last 4 years is developing a AAA quality game called Rising Fire. Rising Fire fits into 3 different video game modes. 1, player versus environment. 2, player versus player. And 3, Battle Royale. Now, Battle Royale is the most interesting one to everybody in this room probably because in the last 12 to 18 months, it's taken a magical shift in terms of its popularity with titles like Fortnite and PUBG. I know even if you guys aren't gamers, you have probably heard of 1 of 2 titles. Maybe you have kids, maybe you have nephews and nieces, and they're all playing it. So really, what Rising Fire does, it addresses the need for a specific type of video game in the Chinese market. There are 2 aging video games currently on Tencent's portfolio of video games on the WeGame platform. They're called Nijon and Crossfire, both of which are 8 years old. And since our cooperation with Tencent on the distribution side, we have been gearing up to replace these 2 titles on their platform. So we launched the video game on June 28th of last year to 1.5 million of their WeGame players. I would say in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we should be launching to the next threshold of dissemination, which is 15 million of their gamers, moving forward to the eventual fully distributed commercial version of our video game in China through Tencent to 100 million plus people. Now, can I give you an idea of how powerful Tencent is? Every single day, there are 500 million people in China that log into their mobile device, their console, or their PC to play a video game. Tencent controls 300 million of these people. To put that into context, there are only 480 million people in North America in terms of population. So you can see and understand, why we're in that market and why it's so prolific to any video game company. To tie it all together, Axion Ventures is a company that is a developer of video games. We have 1 major title that is partnered with Tencent, the largest video game company in the world, and we have launched it in China, and we're moving forward to a wider distribution of the video game over the next 3 to 6 months.
Okay, and that game is, that lead game of yours, of Axion's, is in China only at the moment.
Yes, so our video game Rising Fire is currently being disseminated in the Chinese market through Tencent. We still retain all global rights on the PC and the mobile version of the video game, and we hope to release in other jurisdictions in the very near future.
Okay.
I'll just add that the PC title is the core experience that we have, but we also have a mobile version of that game that will launch shortly in this year. And the key part for us is when you think of Rising Fire, it's an asset that we own as a company. This is not a developer that is working and creating the game for Tencent. We wholly own the IP. It's incredibly valuable to us, and Tencent being the partner in China, but then us having the opportunity to take that asset, that wholly owned IP, and partner with other publishers globally and sell that accordingly.
Okay, that's helpful. So video games, very large market. China, the largest market. Tencent, the largest player in China. And Axion Games partnered with Tencent. You own the IP, and you have other titles as well. Is that right?
We do have other titles. In the next 2 quarters, we're going to be releasing 2 mobile versions of, well, a Rising Fire, but also another game called Invictus. Invictus is the first wholly created video game by us and our joint venture partner in Bangkok called the CP Group, where we have a studio, and it should be released in the next 30 days. And basically what it does, if you've never played Magic cards or Pokemon cards, it brings a card game to real life in a battle arena where you can play against the person across the table from you, on your mobile phone or across the world from you, and it's all created in one app. So that should be very exciting. It's a little bit departed from what we've been working on for the last little while, but we do want to make sure that we put more than one IP out into the market. Our number one focus is Rising Fire, but we do have other video games that we have been developing for the last 12 to 18 months that we will be releasing very, very soon.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much. Axion Video Games. Don't forget that market while you're walking around this gold floor. Thank you very much.